Yo, hey, it's Trey. Sorry for the absence. It's been a hectic couple of past weeks, I guess. But out here popping out another video, bringing attention back to the labor union striking. Although the labor union in Hollywood did manage to come to a deal, there are still plenty of other workers striking across the country. So we're gonna talk a bit about unions, and I think from the last video I said talk a little about surplus labor value and like what that concept means. So, so as far as unions goes, it's about right personal interest, personal self-interest, and then the idea of representation. And we'll get into ideas like collective bargaining and stuff like that, right? So a lot of the talking heads on the news, they'll tell you that you don't need representation, you don't need a union, you could represent yourself, you're always best representing yourself. I mean, automatically that's nonsense, right? Like in the court of law, we'll have a lawyer to represent ourselves, right? So representation is usually optimal and in most situations kind of ideal, right? So this idea that you could represent yourself the best is a nonsense idea, and it's hypocritical, which I don't even want to get into, because you could talk about hypocrisy left, right, and center all day. But you know, those talking heads on the television, and they're telling you that you can represent yourself, they all have agents and managers, right? They pay someone else a cut of their wage to represent them in all different types of ways, whether it be employment opportunities or gigs or negotiating with the people they work for, right? So it's a very hypocritical thing that, you know, it's a narrative that they push out. It's a narrative that's funded by all types of interests, right? That are private interests that are very, very motivated to get that narrative out that workers don't need unions and workers can represent themselves better, right? So, of course, they're paid to say these things, but they're lying most of the times. Looking at you, Tucker Carlson, right? But yeah, so as far as union goes, I'm really doing this off the fly this time. This is unscripted. You're taking, what you're doing is exactly that. You're taking a cut of your pay and you're sending it off to someone who can represent you. See, now in a court of law, it's great, right? You could get a lawyer to represent you. They know the law better than you do. But in a union, it's a little bit different. And here's the key. You're not just representing yourself, it's a whole bunch of people. It's you and all your workers and all your worker friends that are paying into this union that represents all of them and you at the same time. So it's a collective and self-interest thing, right? They're both protected. So when you pay all this money and you form an organization like a union, what do they do? You know, they don't, it's not all bureaucracy and mafia shit, which I know that happens, but it's not all that. You know, like when workers go on strike, they get strike pay, you know, from the unions. That's what these dudes go to. They're meant for stuff to leverage power, right? You gather all this money so you could leverage power against the owners that you work for, because you know the capital and corporate power that owners of firms or services or whatever, you know, just owners in general of a company, they're generally they have all the power in the world. You know, they call you unskilled, right? In most cases, they say you're replaceable. Well, as one, you don't have much power because you're just that. You're replaceable. But in a union, not so replaceable anymore, because now it's a collective of people that are all sticking up for each other, saying, no, we all get better conditions, or you don't get the labor you know that they really need. And I guess this is a perfect place to get into like surplus labor theory, value, right? And this theory of surplus labor value. So you could check me on the story. You could go Google it. But it was a pizza shop, right? This is a great story. So this pizza shop, they have like maybe like 4 or 5 workers. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the owner and like 4 or 5 workers, and he generally, the workplace, that pizza place generally had high turnover, always hiring and rehiring and retraining people. And one day he said, all the profits at the end of the day get shared between everyone at the end of the day, right? So all the money that the pizzeria makes at the end of the day will get split evenly. No, I'm sorry, not all the money, all the profits will get split evenly and shared to each worker. Okay, so we're not even talking about the like gross total, right? So like in this example, like the lights are getting paid for, the electricity is getting paid for, the water is getting paid for, like all the expenses are covered already. We're talking about profits. And when they took a look at those profits shared between those 4 or 5 people at that pizzeria, what they found was that, those pizzeria workers, they were making like $60 an hour. So that means that if they all worked 8 hours that day, the owner and those, other 4 or 5 guys all made $60 an hour. It's a lot of money. It's not bad. It's not bad for a day's work. I mean, come on, it's pretty good. Now let's take a look at what they would have made if it was a normal day. They would have made $8.25 an hour, maybe $7.25, depending on where you live, right? The federal minimum wage, $7.25. So, from $60 an hour to $8.25 an hour, let's say at the generous end, right? That's, almost $50 of value that in general goes to the owner, to the owner of the business. And that's, what is kind of being exploited from workers in general, just in the organization that we live in. And that's kind of what, that is the surplus value of your labor. That's why we call that surplus labor value. So that $50 an hour that should be yours, the pizzeria will still run and all that, but that goes into the pockets of owners for the most part. So that's kind of the idea of surplus labor value. And in this world, and in the way that we have the economies and how just work is organized in general, it's important to have unions to kind of check the power of the owner when you realize just exactly how much they're getting out of off your labor. So it's something to think about. It's a bit of a longer video, but I've been away for a bit, so I hope this suffices. Have a nice day, and see you probably next week. We'll see. Peace.